Welcome in to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler. With me, Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Ryan, you and I spent a week together, so we've seen plenty of each other. So we might as well just welcome Matt back into the group here. We didn't talk about you at all over the last week or so, Matt.
No, I'm sure you didn't. You had way too many things to do to worry about me way out all the way, like literally all the way across the country.
Yeah, as far as away as we could possibly get. We did have a lot of time to talk about Dynasty, and we thought, Ryan and I even spent a little time talking about what's upcoming on the podcast and came up with some ideas. Then right before we were going to record, Matt sends the group text that says, "Hey, I got this idea." And Ryan and I both thought, well, that's better than anything we came up with over the last week. So let's do that. So Matt, you came up with a good idea. Why don't you explain what we're going to do here this week?
Yeah, I was just looking back through some of my old articles from DLF, and I joined in 2015, so it's been quite a while. And one of the first ones that I wrote was one called Landmines and Goldmines, a series where I just went through the ADP of that month and picked out players that could be a landmine, could kind of blow up in your face. And, if something happens to them, it could lose, a lot of value, a couple of rounds of value, something like that. And then on the other side, Goldmines, players that were either going to increase in value 1 year from today or potentially maintain value, because it's hard for those, the running back one, the quarterback one, those kind of positions. It's kind of hard for them to lose too much value, right? Unless they just totally fall on their face. So we're kind of looking at players from that perspective in each round, and we're each going to come up with our own player. We might have some overlap. In some cases, we talked about before we started recording that there's some pretty obvious choices, and in other cases, not so much. Some rounds are more difficult than others. So excited to see which players you guys are avoiding and which players you're taking in each round.
Yeah, so we're going to go round by round. We'll cover the first round. We'll each make a selection as our landmine and then as our gold mine as well. We're using June, single quarterback, ADP. And let's, I guess, kick things off. Matt, you birthed this idea. So let's start with a positive. Who's the gold mine in the first round?
The gold mine. Yeah, we're going to go all the way down to pick 9 for me. That's DK Metcalf at wide receiver 4. Still my wide receiver 1, which I understand Justin Jefferson is kind of claimed that spot for most people. But I still think that Metcalf offers the best combination of age, talent, and quarterback situation of any wide receiver in the league. Volume has been an issue, especially the second half of last season, where his points per game drastically decreased with that entire offense after they decided to stop letting Russ cook, right? But they've made some improvements recently. They added Shane Waldron, the team's new offensive coordinator. He was Sean McVay's passing game coordinator. He's never been a play caller before, but it's an interesting hire just because of the lineage he comes from. And then they added some help on the offensive line with Gabe Jackson from the Raiders, who he gave up 0 sacks in 2020. So upgrading the line a little bit for Wilson there. Hopefully I'm optimistic they're going to have more passing volume than in the past with this new offensive coordinator. Hopefully they're going to let Russ be happy, because, he was requesting trades this offseason. There's some other wide receivers above him that I think are fine to take as the wide receiver 1 overall, but for me, it's still DK Metcalf. So to get him at the 9th pick and late in the first round is a gold mine for me.
I like that pick. I certainly considered DK Metcalf for my selection as well. Ryan, who did you go with?
I went with the other guy that Matt mentioned there. I went with Justin Jefferson, already the wide receiver 1 in our ADP, just 22 years old. And just looking at what he did last year, we know it was one of the best wide receiver seasons from a rookie ever, and the 1,400 yards. But the touchdowns just weren't there for Jefferson. I believe he had 7. Only 15% of his fantasy points came via touchdown. So even if we see some regression in his yardage, I think that could balance out with hopefully some increased touchdown opportunity. So he's my gold mine in the middle of the first round there.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's who I ended up with as well. Jefferson being so young and with such a dynamic rookie season, really, because of those things you mentioned there, Ryan, I don't think there's anybody in the Dynasty community that really thinks he has reached his ceiling just yet. And, because he's so young, imagine if he if he had a quarterback upgrade or an offense upgrade that allowed that ball to go down the field even more than it is right now, that's a run-first offense. So I wrote down Justin Jefferson's name as well, but I don't think anybody's going to argue with Matt, especially at an even cheaper price tag with DK Metcalf. I think he was second on my list as well. Let's jump over to the landmines. Matt, you got to have a guy in that top 12 that you think might cause some pain for dynasty managers sooner rather than later. Who would that be for you?
Yeah, this was the easiest pick in the entire exercise for me. It's Dalvin Cook at running back 4 and the 4th overall player. There's running backs later in round 2 that I would rather have than Dalvin Cook. Of the 25-year-old, 25, 26-year-old running backs that are coming up, that formerly elite guys that are kind of starting to hit that age cliff. He's my least desirable one. He has a laundry list of injuries from labrum tears, AC joint issues, numerous leg injuries over the years. So I just kind of feel like he's a ticking time bomb, health-wise and value-wise, because he's so, like I said, he's so close to the age cliff. So this is peak value, right? He's not going to go from running back 4 to running back 1 while getting older in age, even if he has a running back 1 type season, right? So I'd like to go ahead and cash out right now at peak value in the trade market. I think if he did have another serious injury, I think he would instantly lose 2 or 3 rounds of value. This time next year, if that was to happen, you'd have a 27-year-old running back with a long injury history, right? And he's coming off of another injury. So I don't want to predict injuries, but I also am happy to take running back 4 value for Dalvin Cook. So he's not somebody I would consider at any pick in the first round.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wrote down Dalvin Cook's name as well for all those reasons. I think the main one for me, or the main 2, I should say, he's going to be playing his age 26 season. He'll turn 26 during the year. And then those injuries that you mentioned, he's already got a pile going back to those college years. And despite getting that second contract, the big payday with the Vikings in an offense that, as we mentioned when we were talking about with Jefferson, they love to run the ball, and they're going to focus on Dalvin Cook. I just fear every time he touches the ball that he's going to be laying on the ground after the play, because it's happened so frequently already in his career. So that's 2 for 2 on Cook as our landmine. Ryan, are you going to make it 3 for 3?
No, I do think that's probably the right answer. The more I think about it and listening to Matt's case, and both Cook and Alvin Kamara, who's right behind him in our ADP at 5th overall, it's very clear that the trade value that you're getting for those guys right now certainly does not match what we're showing here in ADP. And that's already a sign of trouble and value that potentially being lost in the near future. I went with a player I knew you guys wouldn't go with, and I guess it's kind of the chalk because he's the last player in the round. It's Davante Adams, 28 years old already, and the obvious questions about Aaron Rodgers and his future, and obviously that would have a big impact on Adams as well. I looked back at our ADP. We've got nearly 10 years of ADP history now, and we've had 6 wide receivers drafted in the first round as a 29-year-old. It's obviously a very impressive list, and Adams belongs on this list. It wouldn't be a shock by any means. Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, AJ Green, Calvin Johnson, and Brandon Marshall. So like I said, it wouldn't be a surprise if Adams eventually makes that 7 wideouts being drafted as a top 12 player at 29 years old. But just with the depth of the position, the youth at the wide receiver position, I think he's a lock to lose value over the next 6 months, 9 months, over the next year. And in fact, we've already seen him fall into the second round over the past couple months. He actually regained some value this month, which is probably just a little bit of a fluke.
I considered Adams as well, Ryan, and the only thing that kept me from going in that direction was I felt like it wouldn't be as sharp as a fall off when it does happen for Adams. I think there's going to be production, although it may not be wide receiver 1 production whenever that fall off comes, whether that's when he's 30 or 31 or heck, even this year if Rodgers isn't there. I just expect him to get this new contract, first of all, with the Packers, and then to play out the next 3 to 4 seasons. Even if he does have a fall off, it won't be as bad as it might be with some of these running backs. I considered Kamara and even Nick Chubb, who just at the end of last season was in the 20s in ADP. So it's kind of weird that we suddenly see him up there. I believe we have him at number 10 right now, or whatever it is, 10 or 12. Yeah, he's actually 11. He was 21 in November. So that's a little bit odd that there's been that much change when it comes to Nick Chubb, because not all that much has changed with his situation or anything. So there were a few players worth considering here when it comes to who the landmine might be, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ryan was saying, just a comparison for Davante Adams, because this time last year, DeAndre Hopkins was the wide receiver 2 in the middle of the first round. And, right now in June of 2021, he's in the third round. So that kind of fall could certainly happen for Adams, even if he does have that productive season this year and Rodgers comes back and everything works out. So I like that pick too.
Yeah, you gotta make your declaration right now. Are you going to hold him and ride this thing out like we did a couple of years ago or over the last couple of years with DeAndre Hopkins and other receivers like him? Or are you going to try to cash out right now? Like Ryan mentioned earlier, I'm not sure you can get first round value or even top 16 or 18 value for Davante Adams, especially considering the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay. Let's jump from round 1 into the round 2 ADP, guys. We have a good list of young players mixed in with some veterans like Derrick Henry and Travis Kelce. Matt, who do you think is the gold mine among all these players 13 through 24 in June ADP?
This was a little bit of a tough one, not quite as hard as round 3 coming up, but I went with CeeDee Lamb, because I think he's going to be a first round startup pick in 2022, and I think there's maybe even an argument for, in one quarterback leagues at least, for him to be a fringe back end first round wide receiver right now. Obviously the offensive set with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, there is an out on his contract after this season if they wanted to move on from him, so he could even move up in the pecking order there. He might even already be the wide receiver 1 there as early as this season, right? Michael Gallup will be gone probably next season, so he's his offensive set all around him. There's not really any holes to his value proposition right now. I don't see, unless he has an injury or something and drops value that way, I don't see there's any way that he doesn't increase in value from here. So CeeDee Lamb is my gold mine from round 2.
Ryan, how about you?
It's CeeDee Lamb for me as well. Like a lot of what Matt said there, looking back at some of his ADP history, Lamb basically moved from 44 to 19 overall over the past year. I think he could see that type of jump again. Matt mentioned the possibility of Lamb being a first-round startup pick. He actually was a first-round startup pick last month, snuck into the back end of the first round, and you guys talked about it with Nick Chubb as well, really from, I would say, that 1.09 area all the way through the second round. We're seeing a lot of changes just from month to month. So that those players are packed in a pretty tight tier, and Lamb's part of that. Was looking at some numbers for Lamb as a rookie. Those first 5 games with Dak Prescott, he was the wide receiver 9 overall, averaging over 17 fantasy points per game. That dropped to 11 per game without Dak, and he was the wide receiver 49 during that time. So obviously Prescott back under contract and hopefully fully healthy. It's all systems go. I think Lamb is really a lock to be a first round startup pick.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep. I went with Lamb as well. Certainly belongs closer to where he was drafted last month. You mentioned him as a first-round guy a month ago, and now falls to the middle of the second round. Belongs closer to that than 19. Seems like a value. There's a handful of guys in ADP, including Derrick Henry, Antonio Gibson, Travis Kelce, and Austin Eckler. Those are the 4 guys directly in front of him in June ADP. I'd take CeeDee Lamb over all of them. Probably a couple more guys, maybe all the way up to where Davante Adams and Nick Chubb are right now. So couldn't agree more. CeeDee Lamb is the gold mine here. Ryan, who'd we go for a landmine in round 2?
I went with Travis Kelce, 31 years old, tight end. No other 31-year-old tight end has ever been drafted in the top 60. And again, when I'm quoting ADP numbers, it's going back about 10 years, the history of DLF Dynasty ADP. So over that 10 years, No 31-year-old tight end, even in the top 60. And here we see Kelce. I believe he's at 17 overall this month. We've talked about Kyle Pitts so much on this show over the past couple months. We all agree he will be the Dynasty tight end one if he's not already. So just by that, I guess, opinion alone, Kelce is bound to lose some value and move down.
Matt?
I think I took the low hanging fruit and went with Derrick Henry. There's just in a startup draft, there's just no way I'm taking a 27-year-old running back with his workload over the last couple of seasons in the second round, because it dictates your entire draft. I think he'll be fine this year, probably even pretty good, but there is a chance after a 370 carry season that he wears down a little bit. Even if he doesn't result in an injury or something, it could just be he's a little bit less productive. And like an average season or a season with injury, and his dynasty value is over. So taking that kind of risk early in the second round, unless I am just gung ho, like I am absolutely only playing win now right now with Derrick Henry, then I completely avoid him. It's kind of like the new car you get as soon as you drive it off the lot. Not that Derrick Henry is new, but like as soon as you take Derrick Henry, his value is already dropped by I don't know how much, at least a round or two in terms of rookie pick value. Like players you take in this range, I think you should be looking, if you're going to move them in the trade market, to get in that 2 first-round rookie pick range, right? And you just can't get that kind of deal for Henry right now. So for that reason, I'm not taking Henry in the early second.
Yeah, Henry's the RB9 in June ADP, and just a few spots below at RB13 is Najee Harris. I don't think there's a league where you can trade Derrick Henry straight up for Najee Harris.
It's funny you mentioned that, because the most recent trade in the trade finder I pulled up is Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard for Najee Harris.
See, they had to throw in Pollard. They had to pay the difference. That's funny. I was considering both of those two guys, fellas, and I think it could be either. Really are good. Both are good choices. I ended up going with Kelce because of that 31-year-old age and just the idea of taking him over some of these other tight ends and really just some of the players in general that are below him. I just shake my head towards it. I think you made a good point there, Matt. Taking Henry really dictates the rest of your draft. I think the same happens with Kelce, because you really have to play now. I love trading for Kelce in the right situation, adding him to a roster to make a run at a title, but to invest this much in a startup draft or auction into Travis Kelce, I just can't get on board with that. It seems like that price tag should be well discounted with him already age 31. Let's move on to round 3, guys. And Matt, you said that this was a little bit more difficult. I think maybe there are some clear ones here. Ryan, why don't you kick things off, though? Round 3, who's the gold mine for you?
I thought round 3 was tough as well. I thought there were several options for Goldmines and not too many for Landmines. So that's the kind of process you want to go through as you're prepping for a startup draft, finding those rounds, those spots you love. And maybe that means trading down from round 2, trading up from round 4, something like that. But I really like the options in round 3 overall. I forgot. What did you ask me, Dan? Landmine or Goldmine?
We need a Goldmine. We start with a positive, right?
Okay, we're starting off strong here. I went with Jamar Chase. We've got a few rookies in this round, so some different options. But Chase is the wide receiver 10 already. He's only the second rookie wide receiver ever to be drafted as a top 12 wideout before the season starts. Corey Davis is the other, so I don't know if that's a path we want to follow, but I really think about what we all said about CeeDee Lamb. It feels like Chase is in a similar spot to where Lamb was last year, entering that crowded depth chart. But according to most, and I think this is true in Dallas and Cincinnati, the most talented receiver on the field already. So I think Chase is in for a big year, and I think he'll be a second rounder, if not a late first rounder this time next year.
The only difference there, you compared CeeDee Lamb to Chase, is last year, you already mentioned it earlier, CeeDee Lamb's ADP was in the mid-40s, like 44 or 45 at this time. And now we're looking at Jamar Chase significantly higher. So you do have to invest quite a bit more. You're kind of paying that premium, you could say, at least to some extent, when it comes to investing in Chase.
Yeah, you certainly are. I mean, Lamb entered the league, and I guess it was kind of a debate between he and Jeudy, who was the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. But those two guys were really locked in. They had similar ADP at this time of the season, of the off season. I think it was partly what we saw from CeeDee Lamb that is really boosting Chase's value already this year.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Matt, how about you? Who's your gold mine in round 3?
I much of for what you guys talked about last round with Travis Kelce, I'm going to apply to round 3 because, like Ryan said, I think most of these guys are appropriately priced. In fact, I like some of them better than the guys that I like in round 2. So in a startup, I want to load up on 3rd round picks. But to your tight end argument, Kyle Pitts is going to be the tight end 1 in 2022, right? So if he's going to increase in value, no matter what, like we all pretty much think that's a guarantee unless something catastrophic happens. Like I know that he's going to increase in value. So I'm going to go ahead and make him my gold mine. He's the tight end 1 next year. He's the tight end 1 now, to be honest with you, I think in almost every situation. So pretty easy pick for me from that standpoint. It was just kind of hard to separate him from all the other great options in this round. Like I would like to have all of these rounds, players in this round, including Jamar Chase, like Ryan said. So difficult from that aspect, but just because it seems like a guarantee, I'll take Kyle Pitts there as the gold mine.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I went with Pitts as well for all those reasons that you mentioned. And maybe it is a little bit of the easy way out because we all have been saying for so long that Pitts will be the tight end 1 by next season and maybe even before the 2021 season even really kicks off and we get into it. It's going to take one big play from Kyle Pitts, maybe even in the preseason, for everybody to go gaga again, and we're all on the Kyle Pitts Express. Not that that's not moving fast enough already. You mentioned the other options, and Chase is a really good one as well. You can mention Travis Etienne, which he's right in there between Chase and Pitts in ADP, and many of us feel Etienne is as good or even a better prospect than a guy who's almost a whole round or is a whole round higher, Najee Harris, and you get a discount, really. He's all the way down there at 32 and running back 19. So it feels to me like there are a lot of options for that gold mine in round 3. I'm not so sure on the landmines, as you mentioned there, Ryan. Who do you land on when it comes to a landmine between picks 25 and 36?
Well, it was tough. We've got a couple of wide receivers who are a little bit older, who have already lost quite a bit of value over the past year. Matt talked about one of them already, DeAndre Hopkins, who was that late 1st round, early 2nd rounder a year ago. Here he is early in the 3rd round. Michael Thomas, his value was just decimated last year. He's the last pick in this 3rd round. I didn't go with either of those guys, though. I dug a little bit deeper, I guess, and went with Miles Sanders. He is the RB 18 right now. Yeah, I know. I've been there too. But RB 19 last month. So those are the 2 lowest values he's had since December of his rookie year when he was the RB 19. And part of this, and we're really approaching this from a value standpoint, not necessarily production. He's already become that player that dynasty managers are doubting, are undervaluing, are maybe lower on than they should be. So I think he's going to have to do a lot to overcome that reputation, I guess, that he already has. Then you look at the crowded depth chart in Philadelphia. They've added multiple backs this offseason, both through the draft and free agency. The coaching change, maybe that helps, but I'm certainly not convinced it does. And then the presence of Jalen Hurts. And that's kind of become a narrative this offseason, which it's one I believe in, of how the rushing quarterback hurts the running back, both through the goal line situation, that Jalen Hurts is more likely to run and steal some touchdowns from Sanders or from any of the running backs on that team. And then also just the fact that Hurts or any other rushing quarterback is going to run the ball rather than dump it off in that panic situation. So all of those combined, I'm a little worried about Miles Sanders.
Yeah, Miles Sanders was a good consideration for this, and I thought about it long and hard. I didn't go with him. Matt, did you?
No, I didn't. But I just want to say, I think the problem with Sanders is like the surrounding cast in this round. Like, I still want to buy him in Dynasty Leagues on the trade market. Like, I want to trade for Miles Sanders because I think he is going to rebound from this a little bit. But it's so hard to justify taking him over players like Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts and those and the like. There, even towards the bottom of the round with Terry McLaurin and Javonte Williams, right? It's just so hard to take him in this range. So for a startup perspective, his value is tough. But from a trade perspective, I want to take him. But my landmine is George Kittle. Again, if Kyle Pitts is a tight end one and it ain't George Kittle and it ain't Travis Kelce, then I don't want to take either of those two above Kyle Pitts. So if I'm making a pick or in the early third round at tight end, it's going to be Pitts. Kittle has one healthy season in his entire career so far. In 4 years, he's had one complete healthy season. You have Brandon Ayuk's emergence last season. Debo Samuels will be back and healthy and is still really good. They have a new running back in town that they're going to want to play with. They have a new rushing quarterback, which is presumably going to lower the passing volume a little bit, depending on how they deploy Trey Lance, right? And he has that injury history, like I mentioned. So there's enough question marks there with George Kittle that I'm not willing to take him in the early third round. And there are better options at the position. I think I would even rather have Darren Waller than Kittle at this point.
Okay. I didn't really consider Kittle, but you make some sharp observations there for sure, especially your thoughts on Kyle Pitts being later in the round. This will be the first one where we all three chose different options. I went with Michael Thomas at the bottom of the round, and maybe that's the low hanging fruit, but Thomas scares me so much coming off that real down season. And I know there were injuries and the quarterback situation and all those things, but those are still all concerns, right? Those are things that we haven't really taken care of just yet. That injury lasted into the playoffs throughout the postseason. And while all the reports are good and that he'll be back this season, you just worry about guys that struggled with that for such a long time and then re-aggravated those types of injuries. So when it comes to picking towards the end of the third round and early in the fourth round, I'm going to stay away from Michael Thomas. He's never really been a guy that I've invested in a lot. I'm just a little bit leery of everything happening there with the Saints, especially that quarterback position. If those guys are going to have the same kind of timing that Drew Brees excelled on for so long with Thomas, I'm not sure that's going to really exist. So I'll take Michael Thomas as my landmine. Let's jump to round 4, guys. We're halfway through, doing pretty good here. Let's find out who the gold mines of round 4 are. Matt, why don't you kick us off?
I went with Chris Godwin. I was pretty close between he and one other player. Godwin is just 25 years old, entering his prime with a great quarterback for this season. He'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2022. So if they elect to not re-sign him long-term, he'll be presumably be able to go to a decent situation on the open market. You get a 2-year age discount on Evans, who is also obviously his teammate with Tom Brady there. I think he has more touchdown upside than my other choice for this round. I'll just go ahead and reveal it. DJ Moore was my other consideration here, two picks before Godwin. So I think he's kind of in the sweet spot for this round. I think there are a couple of other ones you could go with, but I'll take Godwin here was the best combination of situation and age.
I like that. Ryan, who'd you go with?
I went with Matt's other choice. I went with DJ Moore. Liking what Carolina did, love that they were able to retain Joe Brady for another year as offensive coordinator. They at least attempted to get a quarterback upgrade. I'm not ready to call Sam Darnold that even over Teddy Bridgewater, but I guess it can't hurt. And then one thing that I haven't seen talked about a ton when it comes to DJ Moore is that Curtis Samuel is gone. I think that's going to be a huge boost in opportunity and ultimately production for Moore versus how the targets were pretty spread out last year between those two, along with Robbie Anderson.
Those two guys were the top considerations for me as well. I ended up going with Godwin. He is just a tad bit cheaper. Wide receiver 15 compared to 13 for Moore. All those things that you said, Matt, those I really like the fact that he is there for 1 year, gets to play with Tom Brady, and then hits free agency, can sign somewhere and really his career can take off to some extent, I really think. So I think the sky's the limit when it comes to Chris Godwin if he finds himself in the proper situation, which is likely, and he's just entering his prime. So I think we're all getting a little bit of a discount here with Godwin. We should be trying to cash that in at this point in round 4. How about the negatives here? Is there a landmine that really jumps out at you, Matt?
Yeah, this one was pretty easy for me too. I went with Josh Allen. I'd rather have Justin Herbert is going 2 rounds later if I'm going to take a quarterback in this range. For me, Josh Allen is not the quarterback too. I think he's going to have to prove it for one more season, because I believe that 2020 was an outlier season for him a little bit. He had a 69.2% completion percentage, and previously as a pro, he averaged 56% as a passer, and in college too, he was a 56% passer. So we have this one outlier season where all of a sudden he became a lot more accurate. Maybe it was Stephon Diggs, maybe he's more comfortable in the offense, whatever it is. I just kind of want to see it one more time before I anoint him a 4th round startup pick in a 1 quarterback league. He also had way more touchdowns, at 37 to 20 from 2021 to 20, 68% more yards, 4,500 to 3,000 the previous season. So I'm not ready to spend that kind of capital on Josh Allen when there are such other good options in this particular round.
Ryan, how about you? Did you choose a quarterback as well?
I didn't. I think the case is pretty strong, really, for almost any quarterback this early in a 1 quarterback league. So I get that with Josh Allen. As we all liked round 3, it sounded like as good as that round was. I think this round was that bad. It was tough to find a Goldmine candidate that I really liked. And it was really easy to find some landmines, some players I thought could lose value.
Good point.
Josh Jacobs among them. Josh Allen certainly in consideration. Keenan Allen just due to his age. But ultimately I went with David Montgomery, the Bears running back. I think what we saw last year was a fluke, honestly. I think everything that we saw the first year and a half of Montgomery's career was the real David Montgomery. This guy scored over 20 fantasy points 9 times in his career in 9 games. 6 of those were the last 6 games of last year. And we know, he was a league winner last year. That can't be argued the way he ended the season. But I just don't think that's something we can expect to continue this year. Tariq Cohen going to be healthy again. They signed Damian Williams. So he's got something he did not have most of last year, which is competition. And I think when you look at that tier of running backs, I'm going to pick on another guy later in this exercise, but I think it's really clear that dynasty players panic in that 4th, 5th, 6th round range at the running back position and overvalue guys like David Montgomery. So I think that's how he ends up here in the 4th round with a lot of talented other players, especially at the wide receiver position, that I would rather have.
Yeah, and this was the easiest selection for me in this exercise. I went with Montgomery as well for all those reasons you mentioned, and it's really mostly about the competition. There was nothing late last year. We were talking about guys like Ryan Nall, and I think there was another name mixed in late in the season, like, oh, he could get some touches, and didn't, because Montgomery was clearly the better player, but that wasn't saying all that much. His numbers aren't that impressive, really. We can say we all know what he did late in the season, but he barely rushed for 1,000 yards. He caught 54 passes on 68 targets, but the year before when Tariq Cohen was there, he had 25 catches on 35 targets in more games. So his touchdown numbers went up. He still only averaged 4.3 yards per carry, which is like replacement level, wouldn't you say, fellas? So you're right, Ryan. When we get this far down on the running back list, we're talking about late running back 2s. He's the RB22 in ADP. People start panicking. People start moving these players that have shown sparks. And yes, he's only 24 years old, but the real David Montgomery was the guy we saw in the first 25 games of his career, not the last 6 or 7. I'm going to take Montgomery and call him a landmine easily right here. Let's go over to round 5. Ryan, you might as well kick us off with a gold mine here.
I went with a player that I've just found myself moving up the ranks more and more every time I update those. I went with Chase Claypool. He's the wide receiver 24. I'm just buying into everything that we saw from last year. I do believe, I know we don't want to assume anything, Dan. You reminded me of that a couple episodes ago, but I'm pretty sure Juju is going to be gone after this year. Deontay Johnson, he sees a ton of volume, but he honestly just hasn't done much with it. And he had the drop issues last year. There's been reports already that he's continuing to struggle with drops, even in these mini camps and things. So I think Claypool is going to emerge as the pretty clear top option in Pittsburgh and a top dynasty receiver for us here.
Matt, how about you?
I agree with Ryan. I took Claypool as well, just because of the upside argument. I think this is a really good round, kind of like 3. It's almost like I like the odd rounds quite a bit. 2 and 4 were not so good. 3 and 5 have been pretty great. So I think you can argue for T. Higgins here. I think you could argue for Jerry Jeudy here. But for me, Claypool, despite the potential quarterback issues after this season, I think he has the highest upside. So I'm probably going to pull the trigger on him easily in this range.
I had written down Chase Claypool, but I don't want to go with you two. I'm going to take Jerry Jeudy. I'll switch last minute, just to talk about him one more time. And a lot of people, Cortland Sutton is just 2 picks behind him, wide receiver 27. Jeudy is wide receiver 25, and a lot of people make the case with Fant and Sutton. Is there enough footballs to go around for Jerry Jeudy to take that next step and really make this a gold mine type of situation? Well, the same can really be said with Claypool in Pittsburgh. Really, the situations are relatively equal with the exception of the quarterback situation. Most would say Ben, at least in 2021, is a better option for his receivers than whoever's under center in Denver. So
barely.
Haven't you been reading all the positive reports for Bridgewater? He's going to be the starter, and him and Jeudy are going to be friends, I think.
I really hope so. Jeudy would fit in really well with what Teddy Bridgewater does. So, the Broncos need that downfield threat. They need the guy that can make the big play, and Jerry Jeudy just oozes that kind of upside. I want him on all my teams. In fact, I'm looking at this ADP. I see Claypool and I see Jerry Jeudy right here at the fringe RB2 or wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 area. And that just screams value. These are the guys that we should be trying to trade for right now, this time in the offseason, because they're the gold mines that can make or break a season, add so much value to a dynasty roster, and these guys are ready to take that next step despite having relatively solid to good rookie seasons. So I'll go with Jerry Jeudy. Let's jump over to the landmines, because there's a couple options for this one, Matt. Where'd you land here?
There was only really one option for me. It's okay. Julio Jones. It's not that I don't like Julio Jones, but again, you're taking a player that it's a declining asset as a top 5 startup, one of your top 5 picks, right? Again, if you took Derrick Henry and you took Dalvin Cook in round 1 and you're at this point and you're all in for this season.
Oh boy, you're going to have a rough 2023.
You're going to have a rough. You are all in for year 1 and then you are immediately rebuilding, right? So I just it's not that I don't like Julio. It's just that I can't take him over any of the players in this range. It's just he's a 1 to 2 year rental, and there are players in this round that you could have for 5 to 6 years. So I just can't do it.
How about you, Ryan?
Yep, I went with Julio Jones as well. It's interesting. His value has actually gone up in the past month or two. I do think that's a result of the move to Tennessee, even though we've talked and basically agreed that that's a lateral move for him at best.
Yeah.
I think it's the kind of case that anytime a player is in the news that much, he's kind of on the forefront of our mind. He's going to that's going to offer a chance to opt to trade that player or trade for that player. And then sometimes we see that ultimately result in a value spike as well. He's the wide receiver 22 right now. That is the highest over the past 9 months or so, dating back to November of last year. I looked at some other receivers, age 32, that were being drafted as top 50 players. I think Julio is just on the outside of that right now, 52 overall. Jordy Nelson, Brandon Marshall, and Andre Johnson were the other examples. And, as great as those guys were, as great as Julio has been, by 1 year later, they were all late in the top 100 or outside of the top 100. And I think that's probably what we're going to be looking at a year from now with Julio Jones.
Yeah, just almost impossible to invest in him in this round because there are some of those other names, the Claypools and the Jerry Jeudy's, and Davante Smith is in this list as well. T. Higgins and Deontay Johnson are all in round 5. It seems unfair, really. There's no reason to take Julio. I went with him as well. Won't spend any more time on him. I kind of thought one of us would at least consider, and I did consider for a moment, Kenny Golladay, who's right behind him in ADP. I tell you what, guys, I have him on a couple rosters, and I've tried to move on because I like those other guys around him in ADP. There's no way you're getting Jerry Jeudy for Kenny Golladay straight up in a trade. I've tried. Those things aren't really happening. Getting Claypool for Golladay, they're side by side in ADP. It's not happening. So ADP suggests he belongs here. I don't believe he does, and I think he could be a potential landmine. Certainly Dynasty players in the leagues that I play in, at least, including leagues with you two, don't see Kenny Golladay as an equal to some of these other receivers.
I wanted to say real quick, we think that Julio is probably one of these players you just have to hold on to if you have him, but his trade market is not too terrible. Pulling up recent trades, Julio Jones for Rondale Moore, and I mean Andy Dalton's just a throw-in, obviously, but in a super flex league, I think I would rather have Rondale Moore straight up. Julio Jones and Josh Jacobs for Zeke, I would rather have Zeke. In a one quarterback league, Julio for Joe Burrow. It's one quarterback, but I think I might want to have Burrow there. So I think you could probably, if you want to get out of Julio, there seems like there could be decent deals still out there. Julio and James Conner for a first next year. So, I think you could probably get out if you wanted to.
All right, let's jump over to round 6. This will be the last round we're going to cover in this, but I got to say, this has been a lot of fun. It really opens your eyes to where the values, like you guys were saying, those odd rounds have looked pretty good, and the even rounds maybe not so much. Let's jump right into round 6. We need it Goldmine. Matt, what do you got here?
This is tough for me because, my boy Cooper Kupp is here, but I did not. I do think he's undervalued at wide receiver 31, but I did not go with him. I went with Laviska Shenault, just going to be 23, went right when the season starts. He seems like he's been the best receiver in camp so far from reports. He has Trevor Lawrence for the next 3+ years. It doesn't seem like DJ Chark is fitting in as well with that offense as Shenault has. He emerged from his rookie season relatively healthy and definitely flashed the skills that could make him a top 20-ish wide receiver for us in Dynasty. So I went with Shenault in the late 6th round.
All right, Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I was probably experiencing the same thing as Matt because I see Juju Smith-Schuster at the top of this list. I really wanted to stay on brand and go with him, and I do think he has a chance to regain a little bit of value. But I mixed it up away from that, and I also went with Shenault. A lot of the reasons that Matt already said, we're getting that camp hype. Kind of have to be careful of that, but it's not a bad thing, certainly. And what I've seen with Shenault is I would say he had a so-so rookie year. We saw a few flashes and signs of promise, but he certainly didn't have that Justin Jefferson or Chase Claypool type season. But he did gain value. He moves from wide receiver 51 in preseason, and now he's up to wide receiver 34. So I agree with Matt. I think room for him to grow 10 to 12 spots at least with a productive season. Obviously, a quarterback upgrade there, and we think there's a coaching upgrade there as well.
All right, I went a different direction than you two. Probably stayed on brand more than you guys. I went Jaylen Waddle. He comes in at wide receiver 29, 63 overall. And, I've made the case many times that I believe he's closer to Jamar Chase than he is to some of the other rookie wide receivers in this class, including Devonta Smith, who is ahead of him at 59 and wide receiver 26 overall. I think Waddle is a tremendous value, should be way closer to where we were talking about CeeDee Lamb was a year ago coming out of the NFL draft and into his rookie season. I could see him in the 40s. He could make a jump all the way up to where we see some of these other younger receivers. So I really like Waddle's value that he presents at the beginning of round 6. I will take him. How about a landmine, Matt? Is there one that jumps out to you?
Doing this exercise has really kind of started to feel like we are reverting to the early mid to mid 2000s, where we kept propping up all of these incredible young wide receivers and the running backs were falling down. And if you have missed out on running back to this point, I can understand taking a guy like Chris Carson, but he's going to be 27 in September. He has this injury history, that every single year he's dinged up. So and at that age, it just really feels like one injury and it's over for him. If he's going to be a 28-year-old running back, maybe Seattle continues to believe in him and he's productive when he's available. But in terms of his dynasty value, I think this is really going to be it for him. So again, this is just a round where there's too many good players around him, like you mentioned, Waddle and Shenault and Kupp and all these players that are going to be productive for years to come, that I just don't think you can really risk taking Carson here unless it's just like, I need a running back and I have 5 wide receivers to this point. I'm going to take the last running back that's really kind of going to be that bell cow role for their team as long as he's healthy. That's the only situation where I could see wanting to invest in Carson at this point.
Yeah, and he's another guy that just doesn't fit on the trade market. You can't get the guys around him, right? Ryan, did you go with a running back or somewhere else?
I did. I didn't go with Carson, but I co-signed that point completely that Matt made there. I went with Kareem Hunt, Browns, a backup running back, 25 years old. He's the running back 24. And I really feel like he had his shot last year. Nick Chubb missed a month of football, and somehow Kareem Hunt averaged less fantasy points with Nick Chubb out of the lineup than he did with Nick Chubb in it, and was just a huge disappointment for those dynasty players or honestly really more redraft players who had invested in him thinking he could be a difference maker if Chubb was out of the lineup. That proved not to be the case. I think he's fine. I don't think I can even feel good starting him on a weekly basis, let alone drafting him as my RB2. And it just goes back to what we were talking about, how the running back position falls off. And looking at the overall ranks, we've got Josh Jacobs as the 37th drafted player. It drops a little bit from him to David Montgomery, who we talked about earlier. He's 46 overall. And then we see a gap from 46 to 62, which is Hunt, and which is Carson, and 64 is Hunt. So just a huge gap from Montgomery to these two guys. And Trey Sermon is lower in this round. I'm not a big Trey Sermon guy, but I would easily take him over either of these two just based on age and situation.
I considered a handful of players in this round. We had wide receivers like Tyler Lockett, who's going to be in his age 29 season. I believe Odell Beckham Jr. also turns 29 this year, and we've seen the injuries with him. I ended up going with the running back as well, chose Hunt over Chris Carson, but I think you guys both made good points for both. I think there's probably a case to be made for both of those wide receivers as well. Hunt, for me, the same thing, Ryan. I came away from that stretch where we thought Hunt was going to take over dynasty leagues and really create some separation in dynasty standings, and he just disappointed week after week throughout that stretch. So I don't know if he's just become more of a supplemental player, a guy that we can change a pace type of player that catches the ball out of the backfield, or if the Browns just didn't see him as that type of player, and he needs to get out of there, whatever it may be, Hunt just isn't going to be even in a short span. It doesn't appear he's going to be that guy that can carry your team for even a month at a time when he gets that opportunity. Let's quickly recap our choices. Let's go through the gold mines. Matt, you had DK Metcalf, CeeDee Lamb, Kyle Pitts, Chris Godwin, Chase Claypool, and Laviska Shenault. Ryan, you picked a few of the same guys for your gold mines: Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, and Laviska Shenault. And I went with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Kyle Pitts, Chris Godwin, Jerry Jeudy, and Jaylen Waddle. For our landmines, Matt, you had Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, George Kittle, Josh Allen, Julio Jones, and Chris Carson. Ryan, for his landmines, Davante Adams, Travis Kelce, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Julio Jones, and Kareem Hunt. And then to wrap things up, I had Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelce, Michael Thomas, David Montgomery, Julio Jones, and Kareem Hunt. So this was fun. This is a good exercise, something certainly that is worth doing. I think we should probably do it again, guys. What do you say we do this as a super flex version a week from today?
I like that idea.
Heck
Yeah, let's wrap things up. We got a few minutes here, Matt. You've been conjuring up a game to play. Why don't we fire that off?
Yeah, it's not super exciting. It's going to be a bit of a guessing game with ADP like we have played in the past. And since the inspiration for this episode came from an article from 2015, I thought we would go back to get in our time machine and see if you guys can name some players who were in the first round of startups from June of 2015. So I'm going to tell you the positions that were drafted in the top 12.
I know a couple for sure.
We're going to go round robin and see how many of you guys can get.
First round only?
First round only.
Okay.
Go ahead. We're a little bit cheating because you said a couple before we started, right?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm mistaken. All right. Do I get to go first? Because I need to get one right.
Do you want to know the positional breakdown, or do you just want to go for it?
Oh, let's just go for it. What do you say we go for it, Ryan?
All right, Ryan.
All right.
I want Odell Beckham Jr. because he was number one.
That is correct. He was actually he is number one overall. He was also the last player in our exercise today in round 6. So he's dropped from 1 overall to 72 overall in
5 years.
Short years. Yeah.
It was a good run.
It was.
I will go with Des Bryant.
Yes, he was number 3 overall in the wide receiver 2.
I wouldn't have said the name.
2015.
There are 2 names that I can think of. I'm going to go with Lev Bell.
Lev Bell was the running back 1, number 5 overall.
Okay.
Julio Jones.
Julio Jones, wide receiver 3, the number 4 overall player.
I only have one other name. It's Antonio Brown.
That is correct. Wide receiver 4, number 6 overall.
AJ Green.
Oh, good one.
AJ Green, number 10 overall, wide receiver 7.
Are we going until I miss? Is that what we're doing here?
Go until we get them all. So you guys better.
Okay.
We might be here for a while.
Calvin Johnson.
Ooh, just outside wide receiver. He was 14th overall, just outside.
I hope people are playing along with us here, man.
Demaryius Thomas.
Yes, wide receiver.
Oh my gosh, who took Demaryius over Calvin Johnson?
That's probably the end of the names I have.
The other ones are much less obvious. We'll say
we got 7, right? I think we got 7.
Yep, there's 5 left. I'll tell you that there. Do you want any hints, or you want to try first?
Well, let's try. I already missed once, so
I'll go with the only running back we got. Is there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it, but I'm into guys that I don't think would be there in 15. Like I have Jamal Charles on my mind and guys like that. But I don't want to do that. Let's go with Gronk. Hopefully,
Gronkowski, tight end 1, number 2 overall.
This is like his peak then.
Just behind OBJ.
Wow,
that's where Kyle Pitts is going next year, you guys.
All right.
I don't think there's any more running backs. I think there was only one running back.
There was only one. The next one was Eddie Lacy was running back 2 at pick 13, just outside.
Oh, really? Okay.
So more wide receivers.
You've got 3 wide receivers and 1 other position.
Oh, well, it's got to be a quarterback.
I think that's what we're left with. It's not another tight end.
There's 3 wide receivers and a quarterback.
That's Andrew Luck, right?
That's right. Number 8.
I would have guessed Rodgers. Where's Rodgers in there?
I have to look, but not in the first round. Rodgers was quarterback 2 at 17 overall.
Okay.
You know who went just ahead of him? Sammy Watkins, a wide receiver, 12 overall.
Oh, boy. That one paid off. That was a landmine.
2 players left, both wide receivers. 3 players left.
3 left, all wide receivers. I'll take Amari Cooper.
That is incorrect. But this was 1 year. Remember, this was 1 year after this was 1 year after the epic 2014 wide receiver class.
Oh. Mike Evans.
That is correct. Wide receiver 5, 7 overall. And then you have 2 that I'm pretty sure you're never going to get. So
never going to get. Okay, let's try.
One of them was, I'll give you a hint about one. This was the year after his peak season. He never approached it again. We all thought he was going to be the next big thing.
Are they still active?
Randall Cobb.
It's Randall Cobb.
Randall Cobb, 12 overall, wide receiver 9, baby.
Yeah, I knew 14 was this big year. So we're down to 1. It can't be Jeudy then. What about?
This one's the grossest one. This is the grossest
DeAndre
one.
Hopkins.
No, it's not DeAndre Hopkins.
It's a gross one.
I think I know.
From the same division.
This is the guy that I think is
same division as Hopkins? Hilton?
No, as Randall Cobb.
Now or then?
Then.
Same division.
That's
a Viking.
No, it's Alshon.
Alshon Jeffrey, wide
good.
receiver 8, 11th overall.
Well,
things change a lot in 6 years, you guys.
Ryan schooled me on that. Did you ever even miss? I don't think he ever even said a name that wasn't in there.
I think that's correct.
I needed some hints. That's pretty good though.
You guys did good. Yeah, you guys did well.
That was the wide receiver era. So we had one quarterback, 1 tight end, 1 running back, and 9 wide receivers.
And that's what I was kind of alluding to a little bit there at the end of the episode, or the main part of the episode today. Is it like if these second year running backs don't hit, like the Cam Akers, the J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor's probably solidified no matter what happens. But like if these guys don't hit, McCaffrey, Barkley, Cook, Kamara, all these guys are another year older, and it seems like it's going to be a wide receiver dominated first round again in 1 quarterback leagues pretty soon if we don't get these second year running backs hitting.
Well, I think there's just so many of them. Yeah, I think there's just so many between the 2020 class and the 2 or 3 guys we have this year that even if half of them hit, we've still got 4 guys that are going to be first rounders, similar to what we've had the past 4 or 5 years with the McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara group. We could just be shifting that and basically having a similar like ADP makeup that we've had since this wide receiver era of 2015. But it really, I mean, if you made one of those picks at wide receiver, the ones we just talked about from 15, I mean, Alshon and Cobb certainly did not pan out as top 12 guys, but all the rest were hits.
Yeah. Evans is still, top 4 pick. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from playing that game is that you should trade you should trade away anybody that's in the first round because nobody lasts.
Snuck up on 3rd round picks and 5th round picks.
I guess so. The other thing was you said the 1 quarterback. It was Andrew Luck, and of course he was very young then, right? And all of us expected him to be playing right now. I think he's only 30 or 31 right now. So all of us still expected him to be playing. That was probably a mistake as well, investing that highly in a quarterback, even though he had that elite upside and had already showed it that early in his career.
he ruined so many Superflex teams. I can't even tell you.
Oh man, it was rough. So speaking of Superflex, we are going to do this once again. A little more of an emphasis. Only one quarterback was selected in our exercise today. It was Josh Allen, a round 4 potential landmine by Matt. We'll talk about all the positions again next week, but we're going to do this with an eye toward the quarterback. We'll do a Superflex rendition of Goldmines and Landmines a week from today. That's going to do it for this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast, though. For Ryan and Matt, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again next week.